Louisiana. You've got this part of western Mississippi, even a couple counties there in southeastern Arkansas into some flash flood watches, and then Port Arthur and a couple of counties here in Texas. The watch meaning the potential for flooding. When you get to warnings, that's when you need to take action. And let's take a look at what the radar thinks is going to be happening. Watch as we go through Friday morning, starting to see some of that heavier rain. And we'll have to watch these kind of discrete supercells or cells here within these bands. That's where the threat for severe storms will be. Spin-ups, a.k.a. tornadoes, quick developers, quick movers, and quick to die down. And usually verify EF0s and EF1s, but still a severe weather threat through midday. This is when we're getting into some of the worst of the action along coastal Louisiana. The winds pick up. We go from tropical storm force to high-end tropical storm force. Eventually, as the center gets on shore, we're looking at stronger winds as we get through the late afternoon and evening hours, and then weakening. But still, look at this area of heavy rainfall in Louisiana, that heavy rain pushing north and eventually northeast, Todd, as things start going downhill north and start improving further south.
So hurricanes, of course, are rated based on their wind speed, but it's the storm surge that can cause the most damage. And Delta will be no different. Hurricane expert Dr. Rick Knabb pinpoints the areas at greatest risk.
A landfalling hurricane brings with it a powerful surge of salt water that can travel over land for miles into neighborhoods like this one and up rivers and streams tens of miles inland with devastating consequences. At 3 feet high above ground, water is already life-threatening and floods the lower levels of homes and businesses. Large objects can float, including cars and trucks. Driving is impossible. When water reaches 6 feet, vehicles quickly get carried away. Sharp, dangerous objects and chemicals can lurk below in the murky water. This is truly life-threatening and above the height of most people. And when water gets up to 9 feet, the first floor of homes and structures are completely flooded. There are very few places to survive when the water gets this high. This is why storm surge accounts for about half of all deaths directly caused by tropical cyclones in the United States. So please, find out if you live in an evacuation zone today and be prepared to leave when ordered to do so, because evacuating is the only way to ensure you survive a rising storm surge.
So when you look at this map alone and you're thinking of where landfall is most likely, at least for right now, we're talking about areas anywhere from western parts of Louisiana, maybe even to west central Louisiana. But look at how widespread the storm surge warnings are, from Sabine Pass, Texas, all the way to Gulfport, Mississippi. So we're going to be looking at that water rise, because you got to remember, we have all that water and all that wind being that wind pushing all that water on shore. And that's one of the reasons why we're concerned about the rising water. And of course, that force of water is absolutely devastating. Now, right now, still looking at storm surge values upwards about a foot, foot and a half above normally dry ground. So the water level is going to continue to rise a little bit. Now, the best chances for the highest storm surge here is going to be this little area in pink here. We're on the 7 to 11 feet. Again, above a normally dry ground, and that is really the area that is going to be falling just to the east around that center circulation, where we're actually really talking about, or at least to the east, the eye. So we're talking about where the eye wall is. So that's going to be where the strongest winds are going to be pushing the most water up there. But even in places a little bit farther south, Galveston Bay could end up seeing anywhere from 1 to 3 feet type of storm surge. Of course, that wind will be coming more offshore and going to be pushing Galveston Bay, at least pushing from the bay side, but even in a place like Biloxi, Mississippi, could end up seeing a couple of feet of storm surge. Coastal flood watches are out there. That does extend into a good chunk of southern Texas, as far east, Mobile Bay. Could see some coastal flooding as well. So this is just not a local thing. This is a very widespread thing here. Look at some of the wave heights, and amazing. Look at some of these heights, at least early on today, up around 35 feet over in a buoy that is out in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. We're starting to see the wave heights drop down a bit as at least Delta continues to push farther northward. And look at the wave height forecast as we head into later in the day on Friday into this afternoon and eventually this evening, where we can end up seeing anywhere from 15, 20 feet offshore again. All this water is going to end up pushing onshore as far as those winds, Ray. So this is such a multi-tiered thing. Not only the winds, the heavy rainfall, of course, the storm surge, just a lot of issues, not just the wind alone.
Yeah, I can't believe we're already 6 weeks away from when Laura came on shore in southwest Louisiana. Look at this, immense damage. Lake Charles, one of the places that got hit hardest. This town's still recovering. You can see the piles of debris here lined up along the streets. and we could see some major problems coming in the coming hours.
There's still a lot of loose debris out there. We can't protect it 100%, but we want to do our best and try to make sure that we protect property and businesses from further damage.
And we'll get damaging winds also. Not only heavy rain and storm surge, and some of the wind impacts will start being felt as we head through the morning hours. So the winds picking up. Right now, I don't have anything yet, even in terms of gusts being reported at our reporting stations, even out over the Gulf to tropical storm force. So you've got to get to 39 plus miles per hour for that. So a general looks like 15 to 20 mile per hour wind here from Port Arthur, Lake Charles and Houma. Some of the gusts getting close to 30, not only offshore, but also near Lake Charles. The strongest winds, a very small hurricane force wind field down here, down around the center now, which is just starting to come into view here from that map. But as we go through later today and this evening, this is where those strong winds will be in excess of 110 mile per hour. That's the maximum wind potential, emphasizing potential. Does it mean we'll get 110 plus mile per hour winds? No, but certainly the probability is there. This area here in south central Louisiana, and then even in yellow here, might have some damaging tropical storm force winds. That is 39 to 73 miles per hour. So if you get on the higher end, closer into the center of the storm of those tropical storm force winds, yeah, certainly that's going to cause wind damage and blow some things around. Now, when will these tropical storm force winds arrive? 8 o'clock Friday morning. Looks like they'll start approaching the coast. So here in a few hours, we may start feeling some of those stronger winds come in. As I said, we only got a few miles per hour to go, and then through Lake Charles and almost getting into New Orleans as we head on through the nighttime hours on Friday by about 8 o'clock. That's as the center makes its closest approach. And as we can see here from the graphics, we'll start to see those winds push in with the hurricane force winds in that small area, Todd, starting to come in probably between about 4 and 6 o'clock in the evening.
And the worst thing about that, Ray, is that, of course, that's hitting an area that got hit hardest with Laura as well. So in addition to just those sustained winds, hurricanes often bring tornadoes. Just hours after Hurricane Sally hit the Gulf Coast, it spun off deadly tornadoes in places far away from the center of circulation, Georgia and South Carolina. Also tornadoes that spun off from the remnants of our Hurricane Isaias. Caused some damage in the mid-Atlantic states. So hundreds of miles where the storm came ashore in North Carolina. So it's not just a very local event. We have to look far enough away as well. And just look at the graphic here as far as their radar. And look at the warnings that are out right now is the flash flood warnings. They're currently out in around Baton Rouge. And this is going to be the area in the favored quadrant, the right front quadrant of the storm. We can end up seeing the severe storms popping out of here. In fact, this has been a couple of hours of rainfall that has fallen. So we're talking about the right front quadrant. Again, we're talking about this quadrant right here when you're in the northern hemisphere around hurricanes or even cyclones if you're on the other side of the world. But the right front quadrant is going to be the hot spots for tornadoes. At the surface, you have winds coming in from the southeast. You need some type of shear. You need some type of twist in the winds. Well, at the surface, the winds are coming in from the southeast, but a little bit higher aloft, you got winds coming in from the south. Well, there is that spin with height. In addition, at the surface, once we start seeing the winds and once the storm makes landfall, you start seeing what we call speed shear, where we have a little more friction at the ground. That's going to slow down the wind speeds at the surface, but aloft, we're not looking at that friction. So therefore, you also have some speed shear, Ray. And so the ingredients are certainly there. This could be one of those things where we could see those bands bringing some tornadoes in places like Baton Rouge, maybe New Orleans, maybe in places like far western parts of Mississippi. So this is not just where landfall is going to be. It's going to be for areas farther inland as well.
Okay, thanks, Todd. And let's time it out now for you when some of these cities will start feeling some of these impacts from the rain and wind. And as we get into places like Galveston, on the west side of the strongest winds, but still 40 mile per hour gusts. That's tropical storm force Friday morning through Friday afternoon. Rain to come less than an inch and a surge of maybe 1 to 3 feet. So it shouldn't be too significant. Shouldn't see much in the way of flooding there. Lafayette, different story. 40 mile per hour plus wind gust Friday morning into Saturday morning. So a wind event to tropical storm force, which may be a prolonged period of time, and then maybe the hurricane force wind gusts Friday night as the center makes its closest approach. Rain to come about 3 to 5 inches. So we can see what the future radar shows us already picking up on that heavier rainfall that's already falling in Louisiana. Then as we go through the morning hours, some of these outer bands crossing Interstate 10, once again watching for severe storms, maybe tornadic cells trying to come on shore now as some of those outer bands push through in the morning hours. Heavy rainfall, increasing wind through the afternoon, the evening hours, with the worst starting to approach probably by about 4 o'clock this evening along the coast, and then heading north by about 8 o'clock, crossing Interstate 10. The center most likely will be, and then starting to head off toward the north and northeast as it starts to get caught up in the westerlies and accelerate away. So we will continue to watch now. Even New Orleans see minimal conditions. As Hurricane Delta bears down, communities are still staring at the devastation left behind by Hurricane Laura 6 weeks ago.
This scene caused by Hurricane Laura just takes your breath away. A freight train that goes on for at least 3/4 of a mile, completely tipped over, as you can see, and that just shows you the power of the winds from Laura. Now, the major thing that people are concerned about with Hurricane Delta making its way in is the fact that this area already ravaged with the debris all along streets, in front of houses, trees uprooted, and if the wind comes in hard enough, it could create a mess here, whipping projectiles all over the area.
Hurricane Delta is inducing anxiety for families in its path who have already endured one hurricane this season. Coming up, Robert Ray shares their stories. New Orleans once again looks like you're going to have a miss from a direct hit, but still some impacts.
You're watching America's most trusted TV news network,
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
the Weather Channel. Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we.
From this point forward, conditions will continue to deteriorate.
Don't let COVID-19 take your eye off the tropics. This year's threat is more complex and dangerous than ever before.
Remain vigilant, pay close attention to the Weather Channel.
No one can cover this historic hurricane season better than the Weather Channel. Get the information you need to stay safe every day. Storm safety in a pandemic, all season long, right here on the Weather Channel.
I bet you're hoping never again, but here we are again on I-10 Thursday in Lake Charles, Louisiana. People packed up and heading west, east, heading out of town basically. Lake Charles is still trying to recover from Hurricane Laura as Delta bears down on the Gulf Coast.
I'm terrified. Even thunderstorms scare me. I'm terrified. But we came to the conclusion as a family that nobody gets left behind. So we're not leaving them. Tough decision, but we're doing it.
All right, let's take the good news out of the latest advisory from the Hurricane Center, and that being that we haven't seen additional strengthening. Just looked at one of the last messages from the hurricane hunters, their data message coming in. Looks like the pressure is going up a little bit, but the last pressure recording officially was 953, so we still have a strong Category 2 storm, 120 mile per hour maximum sustained winds. Got to get to 130 to get to Cat 4. Right now that's not happening and moving northwesterly at 12, but looks like it may start to take a jog toward the north here pretty soon. The center 250 miles south of Cameron, Louisiana, and the track forecast to go just to the east of Cameron, Louisiana. The center going to be pretty close to Lake Mudd, so it's going to be a pretty lowly populated area, but still there's going to be significant wind and water rise, a 7 to 11 foot storm surge, and then as the track moves further toward the north, it takes jog on off toward the east, and those impacts being felt well inland from the heavy rain and some of the strongest winds, which should die down pretty quickly, but still tropical storm force. That's why the tropical storm warnings extend further north of Natchez, Baton Rouge, New Orleans. Tropical storm conditions expected here as we go through today. The hurricane warnings, though, Beaumont to Lake Charles and Lafayette. This is where your strongest winds will be, and most likely on the east side of the center, somewhere in that area is where the strongest winds will be. It's a very small wind field where we're realizing those 120-mile-per-hour winds. So you're going to have to be right in the right spot at the wrong time, right, to see some of those strongest winds, and hopefully everybody's gotten out of town in those areas that may be impacted by hurricane force winds. And here it is, the potential at least for 110+ mile-per-hour winds in the area in purple. That does include, unfortunately, Lake Charles and Lafayette. And then just on the periphery, we are seeing the winds die off and probably die off and get lower quickly, although we may see in the areas in yellow some tropical storm force winds, maybe Houston and New Orleans. So still could be some damage from tropical storm force winds, especially, Todd, if we get toward that higher end, because tropical storm force winds go up to 73 miles per hour.
Yeah, and it's all really based on the path and where exactly the storm's going to go. And unlike Hurricane Sally, which just meandered, it didn't have a lot in the way of the steering mechanisms. Well, Delta does. There's a couple things that are working toward the path as to why it's going to be moving off to north and eventually off to north and east. We have an area of high pressure that is off to the east of this storm. So, well, Delta itself is actually riding along the western edge of the area of high pressure. And you also notice right around later today, more so toward this evening, there's going to be a little bit of a push off to the north and east, where we're going to have this trough that's also going to spin work its way down from the south, and that's also going to help try and push this storm a little bit off to the north and east. One thing I want to point out here is right along the surface here, right on the sea surface waters, a little bit cooler. That's one of the reasons why, as we see Delta work its way a little farther off to north, that we could see a little decrease in these winds. It's still going to be a very dangerous storm, and even with that, it's going to be about maybe 5-6 hours over the slightly cooler water. Now, bigger perspective here shows the amount of tropical moisture being streamed into this, and a good chunk of the southeastern United States, as far north of the Ohio and Tennessee Valley, looking at a lot of tropical moisture. So even if it's not necessarily in around that circulation on Delta, we're seeing all this moisture streaming in. There will be some heavy rainfall from areas hundreds of miles away from where Delta is going to end up being, and you can see the rain total map. We can see anywhere from 3 to 5 inches of rain, particularly in the North Carolina mountains, into South Carolina, into parts of the North Georgia mountains, Ray. So it's not going to just be an area in and around Louisiana. We could see widespread heavy rainfall and even some flooding concerns for areas farther off to the north and east.
And some of those areas do include some cities in Mississippi where the timing for most of this rainfall is going to be during the day on Friday evening. So as we get into places like Jackson and Yazoo City, we've already seen that band already break out well ahead of the main center. That should go away as we get into early Friday morning, and a break in the action before the main area of rainfall pushes north. So that main area of rain will start spreading in later on Friday and Friday night and early Saturday morning. So heavier rainfall with thunderstorms. And once again, you may have the threat for some of those severe storms crossing I-20 as we head through the early morning hours on Saturday. Rain, Jackson, about 1 to 2 inches. Vicksburg, your totals do start going up about 3 or 4 inches as you head on into other parts of Mississippi and into Louisiana. Jackson, afternoon thunderstorms as we go through today with some gusty winds, rain and wind on Saturday, tapering off as the day goes by to the lingering showers on Sunday, with the sun returning on Monday. Further on off to the northeast, Memphis, Friday evening we'll start to see the rain spread south to north, pick up in intensity and coverage. Heaviest rainfall during the nighttime hours into early Saturday morning with that heavy rain coming in, even the threat for a few thunderstorms, and then very heavy rain early on Saturday with a few thunderstorms also possible. Well, we've got a team of meteorologists spread across the Gulf Coast working to help keep you and your family safe. And of course, you can count on the Weather Channel to provide live coverage 24 hours a day as Delta makes its approach.
Unbelievable, this is real.
Holy moly. When your cameras roll,
This is something nobody can imagine.
our experts react.
What do you do?
Oh my gosh!
Jaw-dropping.
And with footage this insane,
Wow.
Here comes the snow, and there goes New York City.
there's no telling what they'll say next.
Nope, all the way back home.
Oh, it doesn't get better than this.
Don't miss all new episodes of Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel.
we are in the critical hours before the landfall of Hurricane Delta. However, now it is the mass exodus to get out of town and out of harm's way.
Hopefully we'll stay on the good side of this storm. Most importantly, that everybody travels and stays safe.
Well, Hurricane Delta remains a strong major hurricane right now. It's expected to make landfall later on this evening. And we're going to continue to watch not only the winds around the center of circulation, but life-threatening storm surge, torrential rainfall to go along with the damaging wind gusts. So conditions will continue to deteriorate as we head on through this Friday. Welcome back to our special round-the-clock coverage of Hurricane Delta. I'm meteorologist Todd Borick.
And I'm meteorologist Ray Stajic. The Gulf Coast now bracing as they're in the bullseye as Hurricane Delta bears down. Some cities come in and others just outside, but the impacts of this storm will be felt for miles. New Orleans, Louisiana, again. You were in the cone, but now you're out. And again, you'll see limited impacts as officials and residents are no strangers to tropical weather. And having already felt the impacts of 5 different storms this year, you can be sure they are going to be paying close attention to Delta. But as I had said, that does look like most of the impacts, not all, but most of the more significant impacts to the west of this area. And right now, we do have a storm that is a Category 3 hurricane, 120 mile per hour maximum sustained winds. A Cat 3 goes to 129. So right now it's been holding its own, not showing signs of getting any stronger, moving north-northwest at 12 miles per hour. But that doesn't mean it won't. But the forecast is for a weakening as it gets closer to shore and tries to make, or does make landfall sometime later this afternoon or this evening. So here we go this morning at 120, bringing it down to 100 miles per hour as it gets close to landfall Friday evening. So still a very powerful and dangerous hurricane heading toward the southwest Louisiana coast and weakening by Saturday morning. Still a tropical storm, though, and then a depression by Saturday evening as it heads into Mississippi. Thus, the warnings are up. Hurricane warnings, meaning we're getting pretty close here to see hurricane conditions within 24 hours. Your areas in purple. Lafayette again, Lake Charles, hurricane warning, Morgan City, and then New Orleans. This time it's another tropical storm warning. You may get some wind gusts to tropical storm strength, deteriorating conditions along the northern Gulf today, expected to make landfall as a Category 2 storm sometime late this afternoon or this evening with a threat for flash flooding, tornadoes, and a dangerous storm surge. Forecast models have been in pretty good agreement the whole time, and they continue to do so. Look at this, putting it right around the central, southwest central Louisiana coast, east of Lake Charles and west of Lafayette, right around Cameron, or just east of there. I did look on the map, and it looks like right around the Lake Mud areas, right where the Hurricane Center has a center coming on shore. Your tropical storm probabilities here pretty high, obviously closer to the center, about 90%. Alexandria, Baton Rouge, and Lake Charles. Notice New Orleans, you're kind of in there between that about 40 to 60% chance of tropical storm winds. Same thing as you get out near Houston, too. Lower chances, but still nonetheless, especially in some of the gusts, the further away from the center we get, the less opportunity for tropical storm force winds. Now, hurricane force winds, notice you're going to see those closer to the coast, closer to the center as it comes on shore. So you're really going to have to be right around that center, especially on the northeastern quadrant of where the strongest winds are as we watch Delta come on shore, Todd. Still, nonetheless, it'll be a small hurricane force wind field, but a damaging hurricane force wind field nonetheless.
Yeah, and the devastating thing about this is that it's actually hitting an area that got devastated by Hurricane Laura. Look at some of these pictures. Again, going back several weeks, you're looking at pictures of what Hurricane Laura did as it tore through places like Lake Charles, Baton Rouge, a couple of
everyone across the country should know of the devastation that is in southwest Louisiana right now as a result of Hurricane Laura. And it is far and wide. And to have Hurricane Delta now taking a very similar track.
And you got to remember, too, that even though we're comparing two different storms here, a lot of the structures what happened with Hurricane Laura are now weakened, in addition of just being into repair. So the winds and the amount of rain we're going to be seeing from Delta could exacerbate the problems there. In addition, look at the amount of rainfall we're seeing. We're not even talking about it near the coast. This is farther inland now, in around Baton Rouge. Look at some of the rainfall totals just from the last 6 hours. We're talking anywhere from 3, 5, 5.5, almost 6 inches of rain just within the last 6 hours. One of the reasons why we are still under a flash flood warning for a widespread area in around Baton Rouge, off to the north parishes East Baton Rouge, East Feliciana, and West Feliciana as well. That flash flood warning in effect until 4 a.m. So the amount of rainfall we're seeing, and this is really not even directly associated. We're still seeing that to circulation. But as far as where it's happening with Hurricane Delta, these storms are well ahead of that as well. So flash flood watches extend as far north as places like far northwest Mississippi, a good chunk of Louisiana under flash flood watch as well. So this is going to be a widespread type of thing as conditions would deteriorate as we head on through today. We'll be right back.
Domino's knows a thing or two about delivery.
You're watching America's most trusted TV news network.
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force.
Indoors in preparation for Hurricane Delta. Delta is expected to make landfall Friday evening as a powerful hurricane. Officials are encouraging residents to evacuate, but for those who stay, they should be prepared to ride out the storm alone.
If people decide to stay, during a weather event like this, there are particular times that emergency vehicles cannot respond. So if you're talking about the winds get above, 70 miles per hour, then it's unsafe even for emergency responders vehicles.
Yeah, and that's not only because of the rain and the wind, the hurricane force winds in some spots, but also looking at a surge or a water rise. That surge is defined as how deep the water will get above dry ground. And these are the areas that are most vulnerable. Sabine Pass all the way toward Grand Island, even as you get around Lake Pontchartrain in New Orleans and parts of coastal Mississippi. Storm surge warnings, meaning that likely we'll see some water rise. The question will be how much where there'll be. Right now at Pilot Station East and on the southeast tip there, Louisiana, almost a 2-foot water rise as we're starting to see some of those stronger winds push the Gulf of Mexico in toward the land. And that's going to be continuing as we head on through the morning and this afternoon and into this evening as a center. Going to be right where some of the highest surge values are forecast. This is the storm surge potential, 7 to 11 feet. Just east of Cameron, home about 4 to 7 feet, and even around Lake Pontchartrain, Biloxi, about 2 to 4 foot water rise. May not miss out here on some water rise around Galveston Bay and Port Lavaca, also about 1 to 3 feet. So the surge threat is real, especially in that 7 to 11 foot area. The threat for some coastal flooding is also possible. Notice the coastal flood warnings go all the way down to South Padre Island, and coastal flood advisories spin around and go east of New Orleans. Starting to see some of those higher waves now. This is above 30 feet, almost 40 footers out there, right around the center here. So very high wave heights, getting ready to push closer in as those waves will start propagating toward the coast here as we head on through the morning and into the afternoon, as that wave height forecast does get some of those 20 to 30 footers here pretty close to southwest Louisiana as we go through the day. Just 6 weeks ago, Hurricane Laura ripped through the town of Lake Charles in southwestern Louisiana. Now with Delta bearing down, the debris left over from Laura could become dangerous. The Weather Channel's Justin Michaels reports.
Lake Charles, Louisiana is doing everything it can to batten down the hatches ahead of Hurricane Delta. And the concern is what is still left over from 6 weeks ago. That's when Laura came through this city, decimating so many buildings, ripping roofs off of buildings, collapsing other ones, and leaving enormous piles of debris like this one. I have to tell you, folks, this is not an isolated incident, and this is not a small pile of debris. And the expectation is here in Lake Charles, as Delta is coming through, could we see 80 to 90 mile per hour wind gusts? Could we have winds 40, 50 miles per hour sustained? That is the expectation because Lake Charles, yet again this year, finds itself in the ominous position of potentially having that eye wall. And we could actually thread the needle. Could the eye wall go directly over Lake Charles? That's the expectation, and people here are heeding the warnings. For the most part, a lot of people are heading west. They're heading out to Houston to try to get away from the storm. They can replace things, they say. They can't replace lives. And as far as the type of projectiles we're talking about, let me go over here and pick one up. I want to get these gloves on because there are rusty nails and all sorts of other things in here that can cause major problems. But to give you some perspective, here's just a simple piece of wood, and take a look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nails coming out of this. And this piece of wood, as easy as it is for me to hold, 80 to 90 mile per hour winds can take this and throw it into your roof, into your house, into you, into your car. This can be deadly. And the expectation is, when we're talking about countless piles like this one all over the city of Lake Charles, are there going to be projectiles in the air tomorrow? Well, every bit of science tells our meteorologists at the Weather Channel, yes, there are going to be projectiles in the air. So, battening down the hatches, staying safe, being in interior rooms, staying away from windows, better yet, evacuating still. You still have time to do it. But when that deadline hits and you can't go anywhere, make sure you're making good decisions to stay as far away and interior to your house and as away from this storm as possible. The Weather Channel will keep you informed throughout the storm. In Lake Charles, Louisiana, Justin Michaels, the Weather Channel.
All right, so let's talk about that wind field and what's happening right now, what's going to happen as we head on through the rest of your Friday. And for now, starting to see some gusts upwards of 25, 30 miles an hour, not quite tropical storm force wind gusts yet. That will come. In fact, that could be around here later on this morning. Now, the maximum wind potential here is going to be in around the eye, and of course the eye wall. That is where the biggest potential is. And for right now, looking at the hurricane's storm force winds around the eye, around 40 miles, extends around 40 miles, particularly on the northeastern quadrant of this eye. So as you look at this, there is the potential. Doesn't mean it's going to be 110 miles an hour. The potential's certainly there. And again, like you've seen the pictures that Justin Michaels showed you, that is a lot of stuff that could be certainly be in the air there. In addition, we're looking at some of the favored quadrants for some of the spin-ups, some of the tornadoes. Some severe thunderstorms could happen, not necessarily where the center of circulation is, a little bit farther away from that, but places like Morgan City, New Orleans, Baton Rouge already being hit hard right now. We have a Torcon Valley of 3 for today. We can end up seeing a couple of those spin-ups. That is very normal as far as tornadoes go into the northeast quadrant of the hurricane. So when I'm talking about hurricanes, tropical storms, that right front quadrant, the northeast quadrant is the most favored part for the tornadoes. All have to do with the speed shear as well as directional shear, and all that's going to be happening as we head in through your Fridays. It's not just necessarily where landfall is, areas farther away as well. So you can listen to our coverage of Hurricane Delta on Sirius XM Digital Channel 721, straight through your Saturday. We'll be right back.
From the viral
Now to the weather video that we cannot stop watching.
to the vital
Get ready because we are in for another wet week.
and all the wonderful weather in between.
Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
It's almost unbelievable this is real.
When your cameras roll, our experts react.
Jaw-dropping.
Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel. Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
All right, preparations getting wrapped up here in Lake Charles. This is what it looks like from the last Hurricane Laura. Blue tarps all over the place. Aerial shot here from Thursday. Laura came on shore south of Lake Charles on August 27th. I can't believe it's been that long ago. The town devastated, many going weeks without power. Now, just 6 weeks later, residents and officials are having to worry about another powerful hurricane.
Well, when I first heard about its formation, my thoughts were, no way. There's just no way. It can't be possible. But then as it started to look like the track was heading this way, all of those emotions about couldn't be, unprecedented, impossible, they are now completely aside at the moment. And we can worry about that later. What we're worried about right now is the job at hand and the task at hand, and it's human safety and human lives.
For the survivors of Laura's onslaught in southwestern Louisiana, the thought of going through it all again with Delta is demoralizing. The Weather Channel's Robert Ray explains.
Just 6 weeks ago, Hurricane Laura ripped apart the home of Deborah and Jerome Lestraps.
It's very draining, and to have to pack up and leave again, you know, that's a little stressful.
That's the bedroom area here.
Wind and water damage from that storm are forcing them to gut their home. Now they're worried again. What will Delta do?
Had to leave.
This is our home away from home, camping in our backyard.
The Lestraps have been living in this mobile trailer for 6 weeks. Jerome plans to ride out Hurricane Delta in their home that's being rebuilt, while Deborah is evacuating with her elderly mother.
Here I have an air mattress or a cot, and that's where I'm going to live here until all of this is over with.
So you're going to hunker down during Delta inside here?
Yes.
And why is that? Why aren't you leaving?
Because I want to be home to make sure that our home is okay, and you're not going to have looters that's going to be trying to get into your home and take what you have or make matters worse.
About 15 miles away in Iowa, Louisiana, the Becknells are in a similar situation, repairing the roof and getting ready to evacuate again.
It is like a dream, and you want to wake up, and it's not going to be here. You know, it's not going to be true, but it is. Sorry.
No, it's got to be.
Yeah, it's very, very emotional. Very. But you got to keep going, and you got to say, it'll be okay. You know, it's going to be fine, and it will be. We're strong people.
For 35 years, this has been home. The Becknells raised their kids here. Across the street, the broken trees from their yard are piled up. The neighbors, a few doors down, have set up a makeshift kitchen on the front lawn because their home isn't structurally safe. The last thing this block needs is another hurricane.
I believe that the Lord's going to protect us, and we'll have a home. Anyway.
What would you compare this to in your life? Anything else?
No, nothing. You just can't let yourself get down. It's easy to get down, but you have to stay strong.
Because that's what families here do during hurricane season. Stay Louisiana strong. Robert Ray, The Weather Channel.
And they're going to have to brace for more tropical storm force winds and hurricane force winds. Now, the wind field and the diameter of the hurricane force wind field is actually quite small, relatively speaking, especially those strongest winds, those Cat 3 winds, which are at 120. But you can see the area in red, pretty close to Lake Charles. You could expect hurricane force winds would start at 74 miles per hour. So all those blue tarps that are on all those structures in and around southern Louisiana certainly are going to be vulnerable to get ripped off, and then we got to get together and do it all over again. Hopefully that's not going to be the case. Compared to Laura, notice how much bigger the wind field is with Laura. So you did see those stronger winds get closer to places like Lake Charles and a little bit further west, but in this case, it does look like somewhere around many of these same areas, not exactly the same places that got hit by Laura, will continue to be where we see Delta's forecast track go. So you can see just to the east now, right around the Lake Mud areas where the center is expected to go. So this is a little bit better scenario if you're on the west side, or if you're in Lake Charles, Todd, and you're going to be the west side of the storm most of the time. And most of the time, that's where some of the weaker winds are, although they still will see probably some hurricane force winds.
And again, the area that we're going to be most concerned about, too, is going to be the area particularly to the east where we have all that storm surge. Let me show you the bigger perspective here. And this is not just a coastal thing. There's going to be devastation at the coast, but farther inland, we have to worry about the winds, because we can see the tropical storm force winds push farther inland. but also the rains as well. In fact, as we head into the rest of your Friday and your Saturday into your Sunday through this weekend, it'll make its way toward the Ohio and Tennessee Valley. Widespread heavy rainfall because we're seeing a lot of that tropical moisture stream in. So we can see some showers and storms bringing some heavy rainfall as far north of places as Nashville, as far east, places like Charlotte. And then by the time we hit into your Sunday, notice now we have the Mid-Atlantic involved. Washington, D.C., Charleston, West Virginia, Raleigh, North Carolina could get in on this. By the time Monday rolls, well, look at this. Now we're starting to talk about the tri-state, New York City, Pennsylvania, places like Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and even Long Island could see the heavy rainfall. Let's take a live look at Baton Rouge. Conditions, well, we had all the heavy rainfall pushing off to the north. Flash flood warning still in effect.
Well, time is ticking as Hurricane Delta maintaining its strength as a Category 3 storm in the Gulf of Mexico. It's got its eyes set on the Gulf Coast. Destructive winds, life-threatening storm surge, dangerous flooding, the biggest threats. We're going to be timing out when Delta's threat will strike around the clock right here on the Weather Channel. Well, thanks for joining us early on a Friday morning. Our special around-the-clock coverage continues here on Hurricane Delta. I'm meteorologist Ray Stajic.
And I'm meteorologist Todd Borg. A lot to cover with the storm as it takes aim at the northern Gulf Coast. Let's take a live look at Lake Charles. And, well, under hurricane warning as Delta approaches today. You can see the hurricane force winds, life-threatening storm surge, as well as flash flooding, particularly in areas that get hit hardest with the heaviest bands of rain. So let's talk about some of the ingredients. What's going on with Hurricane Delta right now? Now, the current numbers, 120-mile-an-hour winds around the center circulation. Hurricane force winds extend about 40 miles outside the eye. So it's somewhat of a small, compact hurricane force winds. But the tropical storm wind field, rather large. Category 3 storm right now, northwest movement at 12 miles an hour, currently 250 miles south of Cameron, Louisiana. The forecast track does have it taking a little bit more of a northerly push today as it works its way around the western periphery of an area of high pressure and then pushes off to the north and east as a trough will end up kicking in from the west. Notice, though, as we head into the rest of your Friday, how the wind speeds, the forecast wind speeds, we're at 120-mile-an-hour winds right now, but as we approach landfall, that we could see those winds maybe drop to about 100 miles an hour. That is still a devastating storm, and I'll get the reason why in just a moment. Hurricane warnings extend all the way from Beaumont, Texas, so far eastern Texas, all the way into Morgan City, Louisiana, stretching as far north as places like Alexandria. Widespread tropical storm warnings from Galveston Bay as far north as places like far northeast Louisiana and a good part of eastern Louisiana as well. So what we know, conditions will deteriorate along the northern Gulf Coast today, expected to make landfall as a strong Category 2 this evening, and the threat flash flooding does continue. So why is the expectation for it to possibly drop down to a Category 2? Well, this is what we're looking at. The sea surface temperatures, a little bit of a cooler batch of sea surface temperatures as we approach the coast. A little bit of upwelling that went on from previous storms. So there was a little bit of cooling that's going on. If you think of that 12-mile-an-hour forward motion, it looks like maybe 5-6 hours where we can end up seeing the center of circulation from Hurricane Delta move over that colder water race. So it's not going to be a big, quick drop-off. There could end up being somewhat of a mitigating effect there. Either way, though, it's still going to be a devastating storm as it makes its landfall later on this evening.
Yeah, and so the time to prepare is now as time's running out along the Gulf Coast. And this does include Lake Charles again. You can see here, we're boarding them up. Homes, businesses, while some people evacuate it, others are choosing to ride out the storm.
Hopefully we'll stay on the good side of this storm. Most importantly, that everybody travels and stays safe. Materialistic things can be replaced, but life can't.
Yeah, and already starting to feel some of the impacts from, I guess, associated rain and thunderstorms coming in from not the center of circulation, or at least the core of the storm, but this batch of rain ran out ahead of The main area of circulation produced heavy rainfall. Baton Rouge, 6.02 inches of rain on Thursday, breaking the record of 3.98 inches, and still heavy rain now moving north, producing these flood warnings. East Baton Rouge, East Feliciana, West Feliciana parishes, Baton Rouge, Central, and Zachary until 4 a.m. So get to higher ground here. It's been raining and raining hard. Notice how slowly that rain and thunderstorm activity is moving, and it's moving into areas that are going to see heavy rain this morning. Now, I say it's kind of detached from the main circulation, which is down this way, but still some of that heavier rain now starting to come on shore further south. And so if you are in green or in and around the watch area, that's how it's defined, the flash flood watch. The potential for flooding exists. Obviously, we're already getting it here, thus the warnings, but here at Alexandria and Monroe, up toward Yazoo City, and if you are close to these areas, you may also experience some flash flooding. So it's not like the watch ends and that's where the flash flood threat ends too. Could be here also. Just gonna have to stay tuned and keep alert and know when your warnings are going to be and when you're going to have to take higher ground if you haven't gotten out of town, especially closer to the coast, because as we go through the morning, a heavier rain starts coming in. Lake Charles around 7 a.m. Then the thunderstorms come in, the severe weather threat, the storm surge through midday in the afternoon as the center now starts getting dangerously close to the coast. Late afternoon, the evening, looks like about 5 or 6 Central Time, at least with the current guidance. That's what it's suggesting. And then that heavy rain will push into Alexandria. Shreveport, you'll be just on the west-northwestern fringe of some of the heaviest rain. And then it'll start moving in this direction and get back into places like Mississippi, around Jackson, and then through early Saturday, getting pretty close to northern Mississippi, Memphis, you're under the gun, and then during the day Saturday, other places here in and around Tennessee, including Nashville. Heaviest rain right around the center where it comes on shore, maybe 8 to 12 inches, but a pretty good stripe here of about 5 to 8 inches of rain pushing on up through central parts of Louisiana.
And hurricanes are just multifaceted. They're rated based on their wind speeds, but it's a storm surge that can also cause the most damage. Of course, Delta will be no exception. Hurricane expert Dr. Rick Knapp pinpoints the areas at greatest risk.
A landfalling hurricane brings with it a powerful surge of salt water that can travel over land for miles into neighborhoods like this one and up rivers and streams tens of miles inland with devastating consequences. At 3 feet high above ground, water is already life-threatening and floods the lower levels of homes and businesses. Large objects can float, including cars and trucks. Driving is impossible. When water reaches 6 feet, vehicles quickly get carried away. Sharp, dangerous objects and chemicals can lurk below in the murky water. This is truly life-threatening and above the height of most people. And when water gets up to 9 feet, the first floor of homes and structures are completely flooded. There are very few places to survive when the water gets this high. This is why storm surge accounts for about half of all deaths directly caused by tropical cyclones in the United States. So please, find out if you live in an evacuation zone today and be prepared to leave when ordered to do so, because evacuating is the only way to ensure you survive a rising storm surge.
So you have to think about those winds. The strongest winds will also be pushing a lot of that water, causing the storm surge out there. So we have storm surge warnings from Sabine Pass, Texas, all the way to the Gulfport, Mississippi. It is a very vast, very widespread area that's under the storm surge warning. So it's not just a localized area where the center circulation is. It is actually a very widespread area because we are seeing a lot of that water being pushed on shore. Of course, it's going to be where that eye wall is, where the strongest winds are going to end up being. Now, just looking at some of the storm surge flooding right now, notice these numbers have gone up since last hour just a bit, but most of the areas now at least at a foot of a storm surge, approaching maybe 2 feet, particularly in Pilot Station East. So we're starting to see the storm surge flooding rising a little bit from the last hour. Now, here's the storm surge potential, and note that we have the areas in pink here, the 7 to 11 feet of storm surge. That's, again, above normally dry ground. And the reason why it's in this area, because it does appear that the eye will be just off to the west. So we're going to have the strongest winds, those hurricane force winds on the eastern side of the wall, of the eye wall, pushing all that water on shore, and that is why the storm surge potential, the highest storm surge, looks to be in this area. But again, it could stretch anywhere from Mobile Bay, upwards of 1 to 3 feet of storm surge flooding, even over into Galveston. Of course, the winds will be coming offshore, but you're getting more of that bay water pushing in. But you'd still see possibility of some storm surge potential, and maybe a little bit of tweak here and there based on where exactly landfall is going to end up being. And we have widespread coastal flood advisories as far east as Mobile Bay, as far west, places like South Padre Island could see some coastal flooding as well. Wave heights, well, it got as high as about 35 feet in a buoy that was just now located just to the south and east of where the eye or that circulation is around Delta. So we're still looking at 20-foot wave heights there as well. And these high waves will continue to spread its way close to the shore there, Ray, as well Delta approaches shore as well. So we are starting to get to the time where conditions will get worse and worse hour after hour as we approach landfall, expected later on this evening.
And we'll throw on top of that the wind impacts as we'll have a hurricane force wind field, a little bit smaller than Laura, but still a hurricane force wind field nonetheless, right? From last hour where we were, starting to see the winds pick up now, getting close to tropical storm force gusts here near Lake Charles. So that's in the range of 39 plus miles per hour. And you're right at 35. Green Canyon here, just offshore, you've got 31 mile per hour wind gusts. The strongest winds are in the area closer to the center. As you get closer to that center, that's where the winds pick up and get closer to that 100 mile per hour plus. And 110 plus maximum wind potential here from Lake Charles and Lafayette to just south of Alexandria. Now, if you're on the periphery, these areas in yellow still could see tropical storm force winds. And look at it this way, you're probably decreasing down toward 39 miles per hour as you get toward the west. Not exact numbers, but you get the idea. Less wind here, more here, plenty of damaging winds in this area. So as we go through later today, those winds start increasing in coverage and intensity. The arrival times of tropical storm force winds about 8 o'clock as the crow flies here around the Gulf Coast and maybe even into Galveston. 2 o'clock in the afternoon around Lake Charles, Baton Rouge, maybe a little bit later in New Orleans. So we'll start to see deteriorating conditions as we go through this morning into the afternoon. The hurricane force winds in this area here in red continuing to push north now as we get through about the 3 or 4 o'clock hour. So not the center, but the 74 plus mile per hour winds start pushing in about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So this is when the worst of it will start, and it looks like it's going to wrap up as we get through 9 o'clock this evening. So Todd, it looks like the hurricane force winds for any one given point are probably going to be anywhere between maybe 4 and 6 hours.
And that's a good point there. And also knows how widespread the tropical storm force winds were as well. So in addition to all the winds, we're talking sustained winds, hurricanes will also spawn tornadoes. Just hours after Hurricane Sally hit the Gulf Coast, it spun up deadly tornadoes. Notice in places like Georgia, South Carolina, far from where it made landfall. Of course, going back to Hurricane Isaias, made significant damage in the mid-Atlantic, even though the storm came ashore in North Carolina. So it is just a big widespread area that could be impacted by hurricanes, not necessarily where landfall is. Now look at the Torcon. For today, we are talking a good part of southeastern Louisiana and even coastal Mississippi. Under Torcon Valley of 3 today, far north is Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Biloxi, all under that. 2. Torcon Valley today in places like Hattiesburg and Mobile. So it is going to be an area particularly to the east of where the eye is. So we're thinking, why exactly is it in these areas here? Well, because at least the northern hemisphere, this right front quadrant is the hot spot for tornadoes. It has the best chance of seeing wind shear in both the directional as well as speed. So winds at the surface coming in from the south and east, but aloft, we're starting to see the winds coming in more of a southerly direction. And this is all due to the fact that a lot of times you're going to have, you have high over low, so you're going to have the winds coming from aloft, coming more of a westerly direction, southeasterly from the surface. So Ray, you have that twist in height as well as seeing the speed with height. Slower speeds at the surface when you have friction, and it'll still be higher up. So Ray is starting to look at the possibility for not only severe thunderstorms, but maybe a few tornadoes over the next several hours, particularly in places like Louisiana and Mississippi.
The arrival time to some of those stronger winds will be this morning in many places. Places like Galveston, however, looking at some of those winds arriving this morning in Lafayette, one area where we could see those tropical storm force winds as soon as this morning, already getting pretty close in Lake Charles, and 70+ mile-per-hour winds late Friday into Friday night. So that's when you get close to your strongest winds, your hurricane force winds, and the rain to come about 3 to 5 inches here in Lafayette. Now the future radar, we've already gotten this heavy batch of rain, and then as we go through this morning at about 8 o'clock, starting to see that heavy rain come in, maybe a little bit earlier now as we watch Delta make its approach. And as it does, Lake Charles, Lafayette, heavy rainfall. And then as we get into some of these outer bands rotating in, you see kind of some of these thunderstorms trying to pop up. That's where the threat for the severe storms or even the spin-ups and the tornadoes will be. And it looks like we see everything push through Lake Charles and cross Interstate 10. And the worst of the rainfall is starting to push away by about 8 o'clock tonight. And then by Saturday morning early, quickly scooting away and getting even out of Alexandria by 4 a.m. But heavy rain, northern Louisiana, southeastern Arkansas, getting into parts of Mississippi and eventually Tennessee. So heavy rain in the forecast, but a quick shot. New Orleans, one spot that'll get not a bunch of rain, but still some. Could see tropical storm force winds later Friday. And then the rain that comes about an inch, probably less as you go further east, more to the west. Gulfport, 35+ mile. Less as you go further east, more to the west. Gulfport, 35+ mile-per-hour winds Friday night into Saturday morning, less than an inch of rain for you. As Hurricane Delta bears down, communities are still staring at the devastation left behind by hurricane.
Tipped over, as you can see, and that just shows you the power of the winds from Laura. Now, the major thing that people are concerned about with Hurricane Delta making its way in is the fact that this area already ravaged with the debris all along streets, in front of houses, trees uprooted, and if the wind comes in hard enough, it could create a mess here, whipping projectiles all over the area.
Hurricane Delta is inducing anxiety for families in its path who have already endured one hurricane this season. Coming up, Robert Ray shares their stories. And stay here with the Weather Channel all day, all night as our live team coverage continues. We've got a team of meteorologists spread out to keep you and your family safe. Now, where we could be in good luck will be New Orleans, where you may get some impacts from Delta, but the worst will be to your west.
Got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel. Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we.
From this point forward, conditions will continue to deteriorate.
Don't let COVID-19 take your eye off the tropics. This year's threat is more complex and dangerous than ever before.
Remain vigilant, pay close attention to the Weather Channel.
No one can cover this historic hurricane season better than the Weather Channel. Get the information you need to stay safe every day. Storm safety in a pandemic, all season long, right here on the Weather Channel.
All right, this is Traffic Thursday, heading out of Lake Charles, Louisiana, again along I-10. Many people packing up their belongings and heading out of town. Lake Charles still trying to recover from Hurricane Laura as Delta bears down on the Gulf Coast.
Devastating, just knowing what our little city's going through. Again. Now, if Laura wouldn't have hit, I wouldn't have been as scared. But because Laura hit and because of all the debris we already have, that's what's making it scary.
And here we go again, right? And as we've got a powerful Category 3 storm right now, 120 mile per hour maximum sustained winds. That's as of the 1 a.m. Central Time advisory, the 4 a.m. Central Time coming out here shortly. 953 is the pressure. Northwesterly is the movement at 12 miles per hour. Center 250 miles south of Cameron, Louisiana. And the forecast for, which has been actually not changing much lately, the center to come in east of Lake Charles, west of Lafayette. I drilled down a little bit deeper. It looks like right around the Lake Mud area, so might even be just east of Cameron, Louisiana, too. So that's where the strongest winds may be. But notice we're down now to 100 miles per hour. Certainly nothing to take lightly, but it won't be, at least it's not forecast to be, what we had with Laura. And that was a stronger storm. High-end Cat 3, low-end Cat 4, where most of the winds were realized. Hurricane warnings are in place, though. Hurricane force winds, 74+ miles per hour start later this morning into tonight. And the areas in purple experiencing those strongest winds. So should be hunkering down now, making the final preparations early today. Natchez down to Baton Rouge, New Orleans. Tropical storm warnings, even Galveston around the Houston area too. Tropical storm warnings. You may see tropical storm force winds. You're kind of right on the edge where the tropical storm force winds are, New Orleans and Houston. So maybe the lower end, the 39, 40 mile per hour winds, a little bit better bet. But right here, here's the core where the center comes on shore. Strongest winds, the most wind damage with the maximum wind potential exceeding 100 miles per hour, especially in gusts. So that would mean widespread power outages here, even around Alexandria and further north on up the chain on into southern Arkansas, and maybe even as we get into Mississippi, we may see some power outages, possibly even up toward Memphis too. It'll depend on how long it takes the storm to wind down, Todd. So, you know, even if you end up with a squall and one of those stronger storms, thunderstorms, some of those outer bands, we could see some power outage from the wind.
Yeah, so it's not exactly a very localized thing. It's somewhat of a very widespread path. There's a sense of where the damage is, where the heavy rainfall could be, and obviously where the storm surge is as well. So I wanted to show you the bigger perspective of that forecast fan, the fan of uncertainty, and show you how far north it's going and how many areas could be impacted. We're still looking at winds, even by Saturday morning, upwards of 50 mile an hour sustained winds as it approaches western parts of Mississippi. So this is going to be something where we can see tropical storm force winds push very far inland, in addition to the hurricane force winds as well. So looking the short term for landfall that Ray was pointing out, now we're looking long term with where Delta ends up going Friday into your Saturday and Sunday. So the amount of rainfall we can get out of this, well, we have a very moisture-rich atmosphere in place, a good swath of the southeast dealing with that southeasterly flow, picked up a lot of Gulf of Mexico moisture, a lot of Atlantic Ocean moisture. So a lot of this is in place. Now we're going to start seeing the activity drop some rain. Look at some of these areas, 3 to 5 inches of rainfall for the North Georgia mountains, South Carolina, and the highlands and the mountains of North Carolina. We can also see some 2, 3, 4 or 5 inches of rain far northern parts of Mississippi as well. Nashville, Roanoke could see anywhere from 2 to 3 inches of rain as we head into this weekend. So the showers and storms very widespread. So there could be some flash flooding that does exist with some of the stronger storms. You got to remember too, we're going to have some of the outer bands work through. So there's that potential for possibly some tornadoes and even some severe thunderstorms, and even into your Sunday, Ray. Look at this. We still have all this rain, all this moisture spreading into now the mid-Atlantic states. I-95 corridor from basically D.C. all the way down into northern parts of Florida, Ray. So it's not just an area for northern Gulf of Mexico. This is going to be a very widespread system that will bring a lot of rainfall for areas farther east.
And the timing on some of that rainfall is this morning. We've already seen some record rain for Thursday in Baton Rouge, and heavier rainfall pushing north now into Mississippi this morning around Vicksburg. Also heavy rain, and a model picking it up here. And as we watch and go through the morning hours, there'll be a break because that's not associated with at least the main circulation. As we go on through later Friday night, it's when we start to see the rain start to work in again as we get into the evening hours. So Jackson, Vicksburg, and all around central northern Mississippi, around Yazoo City too, through the early mornings hours on Saturday, we've got that heavy rain in. And this is where the heavier rain will be. And that line from Yazoo City to Vicksburg, 2 to 4 inches of rain, about an inch around McGee and over toward Jackson. You will see at least some rainfall. And your timing for that rain, Friday, some afternoon storms after that bout this morning pushes through. Rain and wind Saturday, most likely getting close to tropical storm force. And then on Sunday, the rain does taper off before before sunshine is back in the forecast by Monday. Further north up near Memphis, your rain starts moving in as we go through the evening on Friday, then Saturday morning. Very heavy rain overnight could be waking you up. Have a way to get alerts too. There may be some isolated severe weather here, especially into the morning hours on Saturday. Well, we do have a team of meteorologists. They're spread out all along the Gulf Coast working to help you keep your family safe. And of course, you can count on the Weather Channel to provide live coverage 24 hours a day as Delta approaches.
Holy moly. When your cameras roll,
This is something nobody can imagine.
our experts react.
What do you do?
Oh my gosh! Jaw-dropping.
And with footage this insane,
Wow.
Here comes the snow, and there goes New York City.
there's no telling what they'll say next.
Nope, 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 all the way back home.
Oh, it doesn't get better than this.
Don't miss all new episodes of Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel.
We are in the critical hours before the landfall of Hurricane Delta. However, now it is the mass exodus to get out of town and out of harm's way.
Hopefully we'll stay on the good side of this storm. Most importantly, that everybody travels and stays safe.
Well, Hurricane Delta remains Category 3 storm heading for the Gulf Coast. Expect to make landfall later on this evening. And it's going to be bringing life-threatening storm surge, trench rainfall, damaging winds. This is just the beginning of what will be a deteriorating next several hours and really a good part of the day for today as Delta will continue to work its way toward the Louisiana coast. Welcome back to our special round-the-clock coverage of Hurricane Delta. I'm meteorologist Todd Borick.
And I'm meteorologist Ray Stajic. It's the Gulf Coast again in the bullseye as Hurricane Delta bears down some cities in the cone and others just outside of it. But the impacts of the storm will be felt for miles. In New Orleans, you were in the cone, now you're not. But New Orleans and the officials and the residents are no strangers to tropical weather. And having already felt the impacts of 5 different storms this year, you can be sure they will be paying close attention to Delta. However, it does look like, again, we will see a storm that will go to your west in New Orleans. But still, a formidable, powerful Category 3 storm right now is the latest advisory. In just over an hour, we should get another update from the Hurricane Center. Pressure 953, moving north-northwest at 12 miles per hour. Forecast, right down the center of the cone is where we think it's going to be going and weakening just a bit, but still a 100-mile-per-hour hurricane as it gets ready to come on shore. So we'll see how quickly those winds can wind down. Slightly below average temperature water here in the northern Gulf and some wind shear may weaken it a bit. Tropical storm warnings and hurricane warnings in purple. Lake Charles, Lafayette, hurricane conditions within 24 hours now expected. The tropical storm warnings include New Orleans, include Galveston, and that's where you may see winds exceed 40+ miles per hour. What we do know right now, deteriorating conditions along the northern Gulf Coast today. Expected to make landfall as a Category 2 storm this evening. Flash flood threat, tornadoes, dangerous storm surge. Some of that water rise above dry ground could be in the 7 to 11 foot range. And remarkably consistent on the forecast models here. Most of them taking it right out through and just east of Lake Charles and just west of Lafayette. Probably east of Cameron if it verifies the way it looks right now, but still, all these areas will have impacts. The question will be, what will your impacts be? Some tropical storm force winds. Good chance here. Lake Charles, Baton Rouge, Alexandria. And then tropical storm force winds at about 30 to 40% or less around New Orleans and Houston. Hurricane force winds. This is where we really start getting into the damage. Most likely here, 70 to 80% just south of Lake Charles down near Cameron and Cameron Parish. And places like Lafayette also have got a 60% chance of seeing that happen. Power outage forecast, obviously where the strongest winds are, widespread power outages likely. And then it does lessen as you go further north, but still possible. Jackson, Memphis, Greenville, Beaumont, even just west of New Orleans. So have a plan in place. Make your preparations. Make sure you have power. Make sure you have batteries to power your electronic devices and anything else that you think you may need to be without power maybe for a few days. Todd?
And what's so devastating, in addition just for a landfalling hurricane, but it's one that's about to hit an area that's already been hit hard just a few weeks ago. This is you take a look at some images from Hurricane Laura that just ravaged places like South Central Louisiana. You can see all the blue tarps covering the homes, and unfortunately, these areas are going to be hit hard once again. And unfortunately, we don't have much time left to prepare for this storm.
This is the worst case scenario for the state of Louisiana. Everyone across the country should know of the devastation that is in southwest Louisiana right now as a result of Hurricane Laura. And it is far and wide. And to have Hurricane Delta now taking a very similar track as Hurricane Laura, taking aim at areas in Morgan City, Cameron, and Calcasieu parishes, this is a very tense and serious situation that the entire country needs to pay attention to.
Of course, we're obviously concerned about the immediate coast where landfall is going to be with storm surges, but it's not necessarily about that local area as well. Far-ranging effects as well. Look at this. Flash flood warnings well away from where the center is. We still have the flash flood warning out for east of Baton Rouge Parish, East Feliciana, West Feliciana, as we've seen rainfall amounts upwards of 5, 6, 7, 9 inches of rain falling in just a 6-hour time period. In fact, this area here, just to the north of Baton Rouge, 7.5 inches of rainfall just in the past 6 hours. And this is just the beginning of more rain that's going to be coming your way. So it could end up being a widespread flash flood issue for areas farther north and far to the east. We're getting a little bit of a break right now in the I-10 corridor, but starting to see some of those outer bands trying to work its way on shore. Flash flood watches extend really for a good part of Louisiana, as far north as places like far southeastern Arkansas, far western parts of Mississippi. Timing this down for you, you can start seeing things get really bad, particularly later on this morning. First couple outer bands, maybe a few tornado warnings could pop out of this in the northeast quadrant. And then as we head into the evening hours, landfall expected by late afternoon into the evening hours. We're going to continue to watch that for you. So don't forget, you can get even more coverage of Hurricane Delta on social media. Make sure you check out Pattern on everything from Twitter to Snapchat.
Watching America's most trusted TV news network.
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel.
Homes and businesses in Lafayette, Louisiana have been busy boarding up windows and doors in preparation for Hurricane Delta. Delta is expected to make landfall Friday evening as a powerful hurricane. Officials are encouraging residents to evacuate, but for those who stay, they should be prepared to ride out the storm alone.
If people decide to stay, okay, during a weather event like this, there are particular times that emergency vehicles cannot respond. So if you're talking about the winds get above, 70 miles per hour, then it's unsafe even for emergency responders vehicles.
And we're not only going to have the wind threat, but also a surge threat here. So the water rise is of most concern, especially right along the coast, as storm surge warnings are in place. Those storm surge warnings for Morgan City and Grand Isle, New Orleans also in it. And as far to the west as Sabine Pass. So this is the area we're most concerned about seeing water rise. Right now, about 1 to 1.5 feet along the Louisiana coast. Lake Charles, about a foot of water rise so far. But we'll have to watch, especially during tides. High tides, and this area where the center comes on shore, about a 7 to maybe 11-foot water rise above dry ground. That's what surge is. How high is the water expected to get above dry ground? And as you go west, around Houma, 4 to 7 feet. As you get into the New Orleans area around Lake Pontchartrain and Biloxi, as you get into southern Mississippi and even Mobile, anywhere from a 1 to 4 foot rise. Same thing for Houston. Galveston, 1 to 3 foot water rise is expected. Freshwater Bayou in Louisiana, low tide, 2:40 in the afternoon. But we do have a high tide coming in tonight, and that's going to be just about when the center is passing you. So we're still going to have a pretty strong onshore flow there and a pretty high water rise. So we'll have to watch out as we go through high tide tonight. Doesn't look like we'll be in too bad a shape as we get into Sunday morning. Hurricane Delta coastal flood advisories got warnings all the way down to South Padre Island. Coastal flood advisories include areas like Mobile and parts of the coastal areas of Mississippi. But look at these waves. We're really starting to see some swells out there right around the center, especially on the northeast side here where they're 30 footers plus out there. So very high waves now starting to propagate toward the shore. So we will continue to see the higher waves and the higher surge of the water rise. Continue to push in through the day. Hurricane Delta's path could take it right on through Lake Charles, Louisiana, which still has mounds of debris across the city from Hurricane Laura 6 weeks ago. And as the Weather Channel's Justin Michael shows us, the debris could become a dangerous factor in the coming hours.
The dangers here in Lake Charles, Louisiana are far and wide. This city is still filled with debris just like this from Laura, Hurricane Laura, that came through here about 6 weeks ago at the end of August. They've cleaned up about 1.5 million cubic yards of debris over the last 6 weeks, but there are still countless piles this big with this kind of building material all over this city. And with the possibility and really the expectation that we could have 80 to 90 mile per hour hurricane force winds and gusts coming through here tomorrow, a lot of this stuff could absolutely become projectiles. And that can be a deadly proposition if you find yourself in them. So many people did evacuate, but people here are scared, and some people had to stay. We actually caught up with some people earlier today at an area Walmart as they were getting those last-minute supplies, knowing they couldn't leave, and they're scared after Laura. Listen to this.
Devastating, just knowing what our little city's going through. Again. Now, if Laura wouldn't have hit, I wouldn't have been as scared. But because Laura hit and because of all the debris we already have, that's what's making it scary.
It is a scary thought to have to stay through the storm. That family right there that was just talking, they have about 28 animals, and they could not leave their animals behind. So they're staying, and they're scared to do so. The good news is they are in the minority. We spoke with the mayor earlier tonight of Lake Charles, and they do know right now that more people evacuated for Delta than evacuated for Laura. And that's some really good news. Now, there are a lot of people sitting on the highways still. They've been sitting there for 8, 10, 12 hours trying to get west or north. But the point is people are leaving in mass numbers just to get away from Hurricane Delta and whatever it might bring. In Lake Charles, Louisiana, Justin Michaels, the Weather Channel.
So let's start looking at the winds, current wind speeds, and notice that starting to see the winds gusting a little closer to tropical storm force winds, especially in Lake Charles. Look at this. We now have a 35-mile-an-hour wind gust reported. Green Canyon, which is a little buoy that's sitting out in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, looking at a 36-mile-an-hour wind gust. In fact, just about 5 minutes ago, it was at a tropical storm force wind gust about 39. So as this storm continues to inch its way toward the coast, we're going to start seeing those winds gusting and increasing. So here is the maximum wind potential. There's that potential. We could see, look at 110 mile an hour plus winds, particularly in that eye wall. Whether or not it makes landfall is a strong category 2, remains a category 3. We're going to continue to watch that, but the main wind potential is certainly there. And in addition, we're not only talking about the wind and all the debris that Justin was showing you, but we also have that storm surge on the eastern side of that circulation that could really cause a problem. We also run the risks of tornadoes. We can get a couple of spin-up tornadoes, Torcana 3, and notice places like Morgan City, Lafayette, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Biloxi, all under that Torcana Valley of 3, meaning that severe thunderstorms are likely. A few tornadoes are possible, and there could even be a tornado watch issued later on today based on what we're all seeing here. So something we have to continue to watch. And of course, the reason why it's on that side, well, it is the northeast quadrant of hurricanes and tropical systems where we can end up seeing the favored hotspot for tornadoes. So with this, we're going to continue to watch everything begin to deteriorate as we head on through the rest of your Friday. Stay tuned with us. More updates coming your way.
Weather on Quibi. From the viral
Now to the weather video that we cannot stop watching.
to the vital
Get ready because we are in for another wet week.
and all the wonderful weather in between.
Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
It's almost unbelievable this is real.
When your cameras roll, our experts react.
Jaw-dropping.
Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel. Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow.
Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
All right, this is an aerial view from Lake Charles, Louisiana on Thursday. Now, the blue you're seeing are actually blue tarps covering the roofs because of the damage from Hurricane Laura, which came ashore south of Lake Charles. That was 6 weeks ago, August 27th. Town was devastated. Many's going weeks without power. Now, just 6 weeks later, residents and officials are having to worry about another powerful hurricane.
Well, when I first heard about its formation, my thoughts were, no way. There's just no way. It can't be possible. But then as it started to look like the track was heading this way, all of those emotions about couldn't be, unprecedented, impossible, they are now completely aside at the moment. And we can worry about that later. What we're worried about right now is the job at hand and the task at hand, and it's human safety and human lives.
For the survivors of Laura's onslaught in southwestern Louisiana, the thought of going through it all again with Delta is demoralizing. The Weather Channel's Robert Ray explains.
Just 6 weeks ago, Hurricane Laura ripped apart the home of Deborah and Jerome Lestraps.
It's very draining, and to have to pack up and leave again, you know, that's a little stressful.
That's the bedroom area here.
Wind and water damage from that storm are forcing them to gut their home. Now they're worried again. What will Delta do?
Had to leave.
This is our home away from home, camping in our backyard.
The Lestraps have been living in this mobile trailer for 6 weeks. Jerome plans to ride out Hurricane Delta in their home that's being rebuilt, while Deborah is evacuating with her elderly mother.
Here I have an air mattress or a cot, and that's where I'm going to live here until all of this is over with.
So you're going to hunker down during Delta inside here?
Yes.
And why is that? Why aren't you leaving?
Because I want to be home to make sure that our home is okay, and you're not going to have looters that's going to be trying to get into your home and take what you have or make matters worse.
About 15 miles away in Iowa, Louisiana, the Becknells are in a similar situation, repairing the roof and getting ready to evacuate again.
It is like a dream, and you want to wake up, and it's not going to be here. You know, it's not going to be true, but it is. Sorry.
No, it's got to be.
Yeah, it's very, very emotional. Very. But you got to keep going, and you got to say, it'll be okay. You know, it's going to be fine, and it will be. We're strong people.
For 35 years, this has been home. The Becknells raised their kids here. Across the street, the broken trees from their yard are piled up. The neighbors, a few doors down, have set up a makeshift kitchen on the front lawn because their home isn't structurally safe. The last thing this block needs is another hurricane.
I believe that the Lord's going to protect us, and we'll have a home. Anyway.
What would you compare this to in your life? Anything else?
No, nothing. You just can't let yourself get down. It's easy to get down, but you have to stay strong.
Because that's what families here do during hurricane season. Stay Louisiana strong. Robert Ray, The Weather Channel.
If and only if we stay on the current forecast track and the intensity forecast is accurate, Lake Charles, Cameron should be on the western side of the center, meaning the strongest winds will be off toward the east, and Lake Charles may be on the furthest fringe of the hurricane force winds. So that strongest wind, maybe the 120 winds, are right around the center. So it's not a large 120 wind field, but we do see that hurricane force wind field extend out further, and even further yet in the yellows, that's where tropical storm force winds are. Now notice the comparison to Laura. Much bigger hurricane force wind field closer to Cameron, and obviously the center did come closer here to Lake Charles too, so that's why the strongest winds and the more significant damage from Laura than we are expecting from Delta, and certainly not downplaying it. And a bigger tropical storm force wind field too, and a slower moving system, so that factors into this also. It will be moving slower in its forwards, or faster in its forward speed than Laura did. And Laura's track just to the east of Cameron. Delta forecast track even further east. So Lake Charles, look at that. You were right on the east side of the center. And if you did realize the strongest winds, that was when you did. Once on that center pass just to the west of you. Luckily, we're well to the west of the center this time on the western side of the storm. Todd, this should work out to be less wind than we did see, at least for Lake Charles, with Delta than we have with Laura.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's still going to be hitting the same area, so a lot of weakened buildings. You still got the tarps on a lot of those buildings as well, so it's just still going to be a very devastating situation. Take a look at the bigger perspective here. It's not only going to be something at the coast farther inland. We're still going to be looking at the possibility for not only hurricane force winds around the eye wall, but tropical storm force winds stretching as far inland as places like Mississippi, maybe even as far north as Tennessee as well. It's going to be a widespread rain event for a good part of the southeast in the Ohio and Tennessee valleys because we have a lot of abundant moisture in place, not only for your Friday and Saturday, but even the Sunday. Stretching as far north as a place like Washington, D.C., the Mid-Atlantic, down into the I-95 corridor as well. So we have a lot of rain, maybe some localized flooding can come out of this as well. Let's take a live look at Baton Rouge.
And time is ticking as Hurricane Delta strengthens and takes aim at the Gulf Coast. Destructive winds, life-threatening surge, and dangerous flooding are the biggest threats. We're going to be timing out when Delta's threats will strike around the clock right here on the Weather Channel. Thanks for joining us here early on a Friday morning, our special around-the-clock coverage of Hurricane Delta. I'm meteorologist Ray Stajic.
And I'm meteorologist Todd Bork. So much to cover with this storm as it takes aim at the Gulf Coast. Let's take a look right now, Tower Cam. Let's take a look at Lake Charles under a hurricane warning as Delta is going to be approaching later on today. You can see hurricane force winds, storm threatening, a life-threatening storm surge, as well as some flash flooding as well. What's amazing is that this is later on today, Delta will become the 5th hurricane to make landfall in the continental United States this year. You have to go back to 2005, the last time that happened. So it's just been an absolutely devastating year. And what's even more devastating is that this storm could end up hitting very close to where Hurricane Laura ended up hitting as well. Let's take a look at some of the numbers currently with Hurricane Delta. There will be another update from the National Hurricane Center at the top of the hour. Next hour, they're going to have their latest update there. But currently, Category 3 storm, 120-mile-an-hour winds around the center circulations, the eye wall, and that extends about 40 miles around the eye. Pressure holding at 953 millibars, moving north-northwest at 12 miles an hour. Do expect this to take more of a northerly turn eventually today, maybe off to northeast later on toward tonight. Currently 250 miles south of Cameron, Louisiana. Take a look at the track and where this is going to end up going. Well, it's still been holding on quite steady. As far as the steering mechanisms, we have an area of high pressure that is off to the east. So this is riding along the western periphery around that high pressure. We're also going to end up seeing a trough push through, and that's going to give it more of that northeast push. But as we head our way into later on this afternoon and the evening, notice how the forecast does have the numbers dropping down a little bit as far as the wind speeds, but this is still devastating. We're still talking about a strong Category 2, still maybe even a Category 3 storm upon landfall, and also moving northwest, north-northwest about 12 miles an hour. So hurricane warnings extend as far north as places like Alexandria. Around that center of circulation, we have widespread tropical storm warnings from Galveston, Texas, all the way into places like New Orleans, even seeing tropical storm watches now extending into parts of Mississippi. So we have a lot of areas under at least some kind of wind threat here. So the conditions just get worse for the northern Gulf today. Expected to make landfall, at least right now, as a Category 2, a strong Category 2, maybe even still a Category 3 this evening. Threats of flash flooding, tornadoes, dangerous storm surge all happening. So why are we thinking the numbers may drop down a little bit? Watch what happens here. We actually have some of these sea surface temperatures dropping a little bit. So it's still in some very, very warm waters now, maybe dropping over a little bit. But remember, the forward motion, Ray, is still about 12 miles an hour. So over this cool water, maybe a 4, 5, 6 hour time period, it could be pushing over the water. I don't think that's going to be dropping the strength as much, but it could drop it just a little bit.
Yeah, it may, and still we'll feel significant impacts. Going to be a dangerous, so it looks like Category 2 hurricane as it comes on shore. Already starting to feel some of the impacts. Directly, no, but indirectly, yes. The circulation is pushed out ahead of it, this heavy rain. East Baton Rouge, East Feliciana, Western Feliciana. This is a flash flood warning, meaning that flooding imminent or is occurring in the area. So Mike Wilkinson, those are the counties in southwestern Mississippi that are under this: Baton Rouge, Central, and Zachary. Heaviest rain has moved out of Baton Rouge. However, it's moving north now. Look at that heavy cluster of thunderstorms continue to push in, and another band getting ready to come into this warning area. So if you do need to seek higher ground, you may have to, because look at this, just to the northeast of Baton Rouge, 8.7 inches of rainfall in the past 6 hours. That's over an inch an hour. Over an inch an hour. So it is hammering here as this area of displaced precipitation continues to push north now, away from what I would call the main circulation, or the main feature, which is now starting to push rain into coastal parts of Texas, getting into Harris County now, and also coastal Louisiana. So the show's starting here with some of that rain from at least the main area of Delta continue to try to push through, and the watches are up. Flash flood watches basically means that flooding possible in and around the watch area. So just because you're outside the watch in any of these areas here doesn't mean you can't get flash flooding. So be prepared. If you get to warnings, that's when you need to take action, and a better chance for the heaviest rainfall. So there's that one batch as we go through this morning, but starting to see now the heavier rain come in with some of these heavier bands of rain and thunderstorms through this morning and into the midday hours. These areas here where we are seeing some of those outer bands produce thunderstorms could be thunderstorms that produce tornadoes too, as we watch the main circulation approach. Looks like the center crosses sometime this evening and heads north with the heavy rain going with it. Todd?
And hurricanes are rated based on their wind speed, but it's the storm surge that can often cause the most damage, and Delta will be no exception. Hurricane expert Dr. Rick Knabb pinpoints the areas of greatest risk.
A landfalling hurricane brings with it a powerful surge of salt water that can travel over land for miles into neighborhoods like this one, and up rivers and streams tens of miles inland, with devastating consequences. At 3 feet high above ground, water is already life-threatening and floods the lower levels of homes and businesses. Large objects can float, including cars and trucks. Driving is impossible. When water reaches 6 feet, vehicles quickly get carried away. Sharp, dangerous objects and chemicals can lurk below in the murky water. This is truly life-threatening and above the height of most people. And when water gets up to 9 feet, the first floor of homes and structures are completely flooded. There are very few places to survive when the water gets this high. This is why storm surge accounts for about half of all deaths directly caused by tropical cyclones in the United States. So please, find out if you live in an evacuation zone today, and be prepared to leave when ordered to do so, because evacuating is the only way to ensure you survive a rising storm surge.
And a lot of times when you're looking at that forecast fan, you may be looking right in that very narrow area. But look at how widespread the storm surge warnings are. Places like Sabine Pass, all the way over into Gulfport, Mississippi. Very widespread. And we are all looking, because winds, particularly on the eastern side of that center of circulation, that is going to be pushing a lot of that water on shore, and that is why we're going to be seeing the water rises as well. Some of the storm surge flooding. Now, again, these numbers continue to grow. Every time I keep going back to this graphic, I notice these numbers are now up a bit. Most areas at least at a foot, approaching 2 feet now. Again, that is above normally dry ground, and I do expect these numbers to get worse as the day goes on, particularly for areas that are going to be on the eastern edge of that eye wall. And you can see the storm surge potential. And just by the way the model guidance are looking at here, you can see this area here, the 7 to 10 to 11 feet above normally dry ground. That is going to be the areas where the strongest winds are, where we're looking at the winds maybe of a 110, 115 gusts. That's going to be pushing a lot of that water onshore. And not to mention, you're also dealing with that forward motion of this storm itself that does add to the speed as well. Now, look at some of the wave heights. There is a buoy that is now just to the south and east of where the eye is, that center circulation. And earlier on, we had about a 35-foot wave height. You got to think of that. You're talking about a three-story building, and this wave height is actually bigger than that. So now it's leveled off a little bit, but that is a lot of the waves that are at least offshore in the Gulf of Mexico. As we take a look at the wave heights forecast, yeah, a lot of these heavier waves, the bigger waves, will try and push its way on shore. That is why we're so concerned about the storm surge flooding, particularly later on today. It's not only about Louisiana. Look at this. We have a high surf warning in effect, going all the way down to South Padre, Texas. So far South Texas, coastal Texas, Ray, is not just a very localized thing, excuse me. We're looking at the possibility for waves and some rip currents anywhere from Texas all the way to the panhandle of Florida.
And 6 weeks ago, when Hurricane Laura came ashore on the southwest Louisiana coast, it caused immense amounts of damage in places like Lake Charles. See here, the town is still recovering. Piles of debris can be seen everywhere. Debris that could be a major problem in the coming hours.
There's still a lot of loose debris out there. We can't protect it 100%, but we want to do our best and try to make sure that we protect property and businesses from further damage.
And a lot of that debris laying in streets and piled up could be blown around by the wind that's coming in. Category 2 winds possible. Yeah, possible in Lake Charles. Right now, we still seeing the wind gusting below tropical storm force at 31 at last check. At Bowie here at Green Canyon, 32 miles per hour. But we're really away and well away from the center of the strongest winds. But that'll be changing with the maximum wind potential today at 110 plus. That's the maximum wind potential right here in this area in purple. So Lake Charles, you could be in that. Lafayette, you may be in that. And then outside of that, the winds will lessen exponentially as you go further west and east of the center. So Houston, you may get tropical storm force winds, but the better chances are going to be the further in toward the center you get. Now, the arrival times of those winds, when things may start blowing around, could be as soon as 8 o'clock here on Friday morning, this morning, and then 2 o'clock in the afternoon for Lake Charles. So along the coast, pretty close to 8 o'clock, as those winds are starting to get pretty close to tropical storm force. They'll continue to push north as we go through this morning and midday. And then the hurricane force wind field, this area in red, continues to push north through the day, starts getting close to shore about 3 or 4 o'clock Central Time. That's when we'll start seeing that 74 plus mile per hour wind start to pick up in coverage and intensity and go through maybe just east of Lake Charles, but pretty close to it. So we are going to have real strong winds, Lake Charles and near Lafayette, where some of the strongest winds will be. But again, we do have tropical storm force and even the potential for damaging winds even away from the center. And then that wind field diminishes quite rapidly as we head through the early mornings on Saturday as we watch what's ever left of this storm push on off toward the north and east. Through the morning hours, watching now the winds pick up 35, 40 miles per hour, Lake Charles, 60 miles per hour by 3 o'clock this afternoon. And then your strongest winds probably as we head on through this evening and on into early tonight. Todd?
And not only about that eye wall, we're also concerned about things like tornadoes. You're taking a look at some of the damage from tornadoes from previous hurricanes there. Hurricane Sally hit the Gulf Coast, spun off deadly tornadoes in Georgia and South Carolina. Tornadoes also spun off from the remains of Hurricane Isaias. Left significant damage in the mid-Atlantic states, even though it ended up making landfall in North Carolina. So it's not just about that localized area. It is a very widespread thing. And you take a look at the Torcon values for today and notice that a lot of the areas under that Torcon is not the area we're talking about maybe where landfall, but a little bit farther off to the east. Morgan City, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Biloxi, all in that Torcon value of a 3. And of course, that means severe thunderstorms are likely. For today, we have a few tornadoes possible. Maybe even a tornado watch could be issued later on today as well. So why is this happening? Well, it is in that favored spot for hurricanes, at least for the northern hemisphere. We're looking at the northeast quadrant. That ends up bringing a lot of things here. We have winds at the surface coming in from the southeast, a little bit higher up. We're going to have winds coming in from the south, so we have a little bit of that spin with height. In addition, when we end up making landfall, we have speed shear as well. The winds will run into more friction at the surface. Aloft, we won't have that, so we have a lot of the shearing going on, and that is why we have these brief spin-ups. A lot of times EF0s, EF1s, but still enough that could do a little bit of damage out there. So Ray, widespread areas could see severe thunderstorms, isolated tornadoes. We are going to be in that time where each hour continues to get worse and worse until we end up making landfall, and then eventually things end up getting a little bit better as we head into your Saturday and Sunday here.
Yeah, and the arrival times of those impacts will be kind coming up here shortly in the morning hours, and then continuing to spread north and eventually northeast as we head through the day. Lafayette, all right, your 40-mile-per-hour gusts, your tropical storm force wind gusts start this morning, could last through Saturday morning, then could get into your hurricane force winds here as we go through later Friday and into Friday night. Rain to come about 3 to 5 inches. Your rainfall, this is that one batch had gone through parts of Louisiana already, and it's pushing north now, but now the main show really starts as we get into probably the mid-morning hours here in southern Louisiana, Lake Charles, even around Beaumont in Texas. Lafayette starting to see the rain pick up in intensity and coverage. And don't forget the wind with this too. Windswept rainfall expected along Interstate 10, Lafayette, Lake Charles through midday. And then the strongest winds will start picking up later in the afternoon and the evening hours. This is when now we're starting to see that northern eye wall approach, that northeastern eye wall push off toward the north and east now and head probably right between Lake Charles and Lafayette with the strongest winds right in this area here and continue to bring the heavy rain with it. So wind-swept rain and damaging winds, flooding rain along with the water rise continuing through early Saturday morning, then starting to taper off. New Orleans, again, you're probably too far to the east to experience the strong winds, but chance of some tropical storm force gusts Friday evening into Saturday morning, and the rain again will be lessened to less than an inch in many places as it looks like the heaviest rain will be well to your west in New Orleans once again. Well, as Hurricane Delta bears down, communities are still staring at the devastation left behind by Hurricane Laura 6 weeks ago.
This scene caused by Hurricane Laura just takes your breath away. A freight train that goes on for at least 3/4 of a mile, completely tipped over, as you can see, and that just shows you the power of the winds from Laura. Now, the major thing that people are concerned about with Hurricane Delta making its way in is the fact that this area already ravaged with the debris all along streets, in front of houses, trees uprooted, and if the wind comes in hard enough, it could create a mess here, whipping projectiles all over the area.
Hurricane Delta is inducing anxiety for families in its path who have already endured one hurricane this season. Coming up, Robert Ray shares their stories. And we'll continue to bring you live coverage. Stay with the Weather Channel all day long as our live team coverage will be continuing. We have a team of meteorologists spread out working to keep you and your family safe. New Orleans, once again, just west. You will see some impacts from Delta, but right now, the heaviest rain, strongest winds to your west.
Let's talk. Most trusted TV news network.
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel. Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we.
From this point forward, conditions will continue to deteriorate.
Don't let COVID-19 take your eye off the tropics. This year's threat is more complex and dangerous than ever before.
Remain vigilant, pay close attention to the Weather Channel.
No one can cover this historic hurricane season better than the Weather Channel. Get the information you need to stay safe every day. Storm safety in a pandemic, all season long, right here on the Weather Channel.
This was daylight Thursday afternoon in Lake Charles, and I saw some of this back up on I-10 even into the nighttime hours. Hopefully we're starting to get it cleaned up a bit as people are gathering their belongings, heading out of town, east, west, whatever way they can get there. Lake Charles still trying to recover from Hurricane Laura. That's going to be a long process, but they're waiting for Delta now to bear down on the coast.
I'm terrified. Even thunderstorms scare me. I'm terrified. But we came to the conclusion as a family that nobody gets left behind. So we're not leaving them. Tough decision, but we're doing it.
And another high impact event here coming with Delta. It's not going to hit exactly in the same spot, but some of the impacts are going to be hurricane force winds, are going to be storm surge or water rise above dry ground. The severe weather element of it is the latest advisory, 120 mile per hour Cat 3, the pressure 953 millibars. Did see some of the airplane data coming in, though, seeing the pressure coming up slightly. So we'll see what the next advisory do here, probably within 30 minutes or so, if we do see a lowering of the wind speed with that rising pressure. But right now, still a formidable storm to deal with, a Cat 3 major hurricane. The structure doesn't look as good. It's been tough to keep at least an eye showing up here. It doesn't mean it's not there. It's just been covered up by the cloud cover. And basically, it's been covered up and open now to the south side. So doesn't look as good as it did before, but that's a good thing when we do see weakening and rising pressures. The track's still the same as it's been east of Lake Charles, west of Lafayette, around the Cameron area, pretty close to it, and then heading inland and certainly spreading the rain and the wind, but less wind as we go through Friday and into Saturday. Hurricane warnings within 24 hours, expecting hurricane conditions. Lake Charles, Lafayette first, then up toward places like Alexandria. And around that, we've got tropical storm warnings. Galveston, you're in that. And even New Orleans, you're in that also for tropical storm conditions. Winds maybe 39 plus miles per hour, plus the rain, and also seeing the severe weather threat and the water rise. Right now, starting to get close. Look at that, 1 mile an hour away now from tropical storm winds out there at Green Canyon 338. Lake Charles gusting to 31. The winds for the most part haven't picked up yet, but they will, and promise me in a big way. Damaging hurricane force winds, the maximum potential of this area in purple. So Lake Charles, again, you are in hurricane force winds and some of the higher chances of getting those winds in excess of 100 miles per hour along with Lafayette. That'll lead to power outages, widespread in some spots. That threat does lessen as the system winds down, Todd, as it continues to move north and eventually northeast.
And as we take a look at areas a little bit farther north and northeast, going to continue to watch this track and notice how as we're heading into this weekend, we still have the possibility for tropical storm force wind gusts in places like the far northeast Louisiana, now pushing into northern parts of Mississippi as Delta will work its way on shore, drop down to tropical storm force winds, and then eventually down to a tropical depression, but still could end up bringing some damage to areas farther off to the north. In addition, we run the risk for some rain. There is a lot of moisture, a lot of low-level moisture in place, abundant southeasterly flow bringing in the Gulf of Mexico and Atlantic Ocean moisture in place. And you can see widespread areas, 2-3 inches of rain. Places like Birmingham, Alabama, Nashville, Memphis could get in on 2-3 inches of rain. Even some areas in some of the higher elevations, North Georgia mountains, South Carolina, and some of the higher elevations, and the western parts of North Carolina could see 3, maybe upwards of 5 inches of rain. And in addition, when you have a lot of rain, that can also fall into the valleys, causing some flash flooding issues. So we have to really watch not only where landfall is going to be, but areas a little bit farther off to the east, we can see rain upwards about 1 inch, 2 inches of rain perhaps in places like Washington, D.C., New York City, Ray, as we head into this weekend, talking more so in your late Saturday into Sunday.
Yeah, and that heavy rain's continuing to push north. There's been one batch out ahead of the main area of rainfall that's gone through Baton Rouge with record rain over 6 inches. And now, as we go through the afternoon hours, see by 5 p.m., starting to see that rain get into Mississippi. Jackson and Brookhaven starting to see some heavy rainfall, and it's steady to heavy for a few hours, and it tries to break up a little bit as we head on through Friday night, and then it's Saturday morning, and maybe even by sunrise. Most of the rain may actually be out of the area. So Jackson up to 1 inch of rain to the west. So you go I-20 westbound, you run into 3 or 4 inches around Vicksburg. So the message here is it'll be cloudy with the rain coming back as we go on through Saturday. And then Sunday, the rain tapers off to showers with sunshine returning Monday in Jackson. Memphis, you're next Friday evening. Starting to see some of those bands push north now with occasional rain and thunderstorms and some pockets of heavier rainfall. There's a pocket. Here's another pocket. Some of those storms like showing up there on the future radar could go severe. We'll have the potential maybe to prompt some isolated thunderstorms that could produce tornadoes as we go through Saturday morning, probably getting the last gasp here as the rain should be around 1 to 3 inches for the most part, western Tennessee and the northern parts of Mississippi and southeastern Arkansas. So not looking at a huge flood threat, but there may be some ponding of the water on the roadways on some of the areas that are normally prone to flooding when you get about 1 to 3 inches of rain. Friday showers, rain with thunder Saturday, and then some lingering showers here in Memphis on Sunday. Much better day as we look ahead toward Monday with a mix of clouds and sunshine. Well, we've got a team of meteorologists spread out across the Gulf Coast, working to help keep you and your family safe. And of course, you can count on the Weather Channel to provide live coverage 24 hours a day as Delta approaches.
Oh, holy moly. When your cameras roll,
this is something nobody can imagine.
Our experts react.
What do you do?
Oh my gosh! Jaw-dropping.
And with footage this insane.
Wow!
Here comes the snow, and there goes New York City.
There's no telling what they'll say next.
Nope, 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 all the way back home. Oh! It doesn't get better than this.
Don't miss all new episodes of Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel.
We are in the critical hours before the landfall of Hurricane Delta. However, now it is the mass exodus to get out of town and out of harm's way.
Hopefully we'll stay on the good side of this storm. Most importantly, that everybody travels and stays safe.
Well, Hurricane Delta, dangerous hurricane heading for the Gulf Coast, expected to become the 5th hurricane to make landfall in the continental United States later on this evening. It's bringing life-threatening storm surge, trench rainfall, and damaging winds to the northern coast of the Gulf of Mexico. Welcome back to a special round-the-clock coverage of Hurricane Delta. I'm meteorologist Todd Borick.
And I'm meteorologist Ray staging the Gulf Coast once again in the bullseye as Hurricane Delta bears down. Some cities are in the cone and others just outside of it, but impacts from this storm will be felt for miles. On the outside, looking in again in New Orleans, you've been to the cone 6 times this year and had not one direct hit, and that's good news. The officials and residents, though, are preparing and are no strangers to tropical weather and already felt the impacts of 5 different storms this year. So you can be sure they're going to be paying close attention to Delta. But again, everything has been either to the east or to the west of New Orleans in terms of direct or significant impacts. Haven't had a bunch of rain, haven't had a bunch of flooding, and certainly haven't had much wind. A lot of people who are fleeing again from Delta have also headed to New Orleans, and some are still there that have left during Laura. So right now, that seems to be a good place to be. A new update coming in here shortly, probably by the top of the hour. But at the latest from the Hurricane Center, the 1 a.m. Central Advisory, pressure 953. Seeing some reports coming in, the pressure may be coming up a couple millibars, so that might bring the winds down. Not going to speculate here, but still a powerful Category 3 storm, 250 miles south of Cameron, Louisiana. And that's basically where it's projected to go. Pretty close to Cameron, Louisiana, if you go down the center of this cone. So just east of Lake Charles and further east than Laura went, but still a 100-mile-per-hour hurricane coming on shore. So significant rainfall and wind damage blowing around debris that's been piled up from Laura. So we've got to be aware that that's going to be an issue too. Hurricane warnings out, hurricane force conditions or winds expected within 24 hours of tropical storm watches. Do get Houston and do get New Orleans on both sides of the center of circulation. What we do know right now is that conditions will deteriorate along the northern Gulf today, making landfall. Right now, the forecast is a Category 2 storm this evening, and the threat for flash flooding, tornadoes, and dangerous storm surge are all there. Forecast. 100-mile-per-hour storm forecast to come in and weaken as we go through the next few hours. Right, you got this little kind of pool here of below average water temperatures and just below 80 degrees or pretty close to 80 degrees. So that's kind of the threshold. The question will be, is that enough time to weaken it significantly? We'll see. But the probability of tropical storm force winds, Alexandria, Baton Rouge, you're the greatest threat. New Orleans, you've got a shot. Same thing in Houston here as we'll probably get some wind gusts at times in excess of tropical storm force, but the core of the strongest winds closer to the center. Todd?
Well, several cities on the Gulf Coast are still trying to recover from Hurricane Laura, which tore through places like Lake Charles, Baton Rouge 6 weeks ago. Debris still litters roads, and blue tarps cover homes as Delta moves inland.
This is the worst case scenario for the state of Louisiana. Everyone across the country should know of the devastation that is in southwest Louisiana right now as a result of Hurricane Laura, and it is far and wide. And to have Hurricane Delta now taking a very similar track as Hurricane Laura, taking aim at areas in Morgan City, Cameron, and Calcasieu parishes, this is a very tense and serious situation that the entire country needs to pay attention to.
And we're also watching for areas a little bit farther away from where expected landfall is going to be. Extremely heavy rainfall has fallen in places around Baton Rouge. In fact, flash flood warning does continue through the rest of this hour for East Baton Rouge Parish, East Feliciana, West Feliciana. Already seeing some rainfall totals 5 upwards of 9 inches of rain. In fact, look at this accumulation amount we had here just in the past 6 hours. Look at this, 8.2 inches of rain has fallen in just that short period of time. And it looks like we may end up seeing more rain fall in the same area. We have a very strong southeast low-level jet that's really bringing in some warm, moisture air, and that's really starting to bring up more